Hey, everybody. Welcome to Too Late to Quit podcast. This is Jeff Iftikharuddin. I am so excited to share with you this interview today, episode 9, with my friend Allan Finn. He's a musician extraordinaire. Just released his first song with his project, Incremental Progress. Allan and I had a great conversation from his very early musical beginning all the way to current day. He's an amazing teacher, and he's got some amazing stories. Let's do this. You're too old, and it's too late to start. Has anyone ever said that to you? Well, I'm here to tell you that it's too late to quit. And oh yeah, you're not too old. In fact, the good news is that it's always the right time to start. You've come to the right place. Me and my friends are going to share our stories of why we will never, ever throw in the towel. Welcome to the Too Late to Quit podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Iftikharuddin. Let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 9. This is a very, very special episode for me. I have a guest, and before I introduce this guest, I want to tell you a story about how this person came into my life, and I've always been very fortunate from this moment. About 20 years ago, I was living in Brooklyn, New York, with my good friend Rob, who I'd met in the Tony Robbins world. And Rob and I were conquering Brooklyn, one cool bar at a time. And Rob would always tell me about his older brother, Allan, about how he was a musician, and that would be super cool if we could hang out. And one day we actually got to hang out. And I know you've heard that term out there, brother from another mother, but from the moment I met Allan, I felt like we were brothers, not from another world, but in this current world. Allan is one of the most, I feel Allan is the kind of person that if there is some kind of a conflict going on, say there's two people in a room having discussion, if Allan walks into the room, just his vibes alone would calm the entire scene. Allan has this presence about him that has always made me feel super at ease. And I was able to geek out and ask him all of these burning musical theory questions I'd had forever because of Allan's musical background. And when I started this podcast, I was talking about it to Allan, and Allan, for me, is the example of somebody who lives the exact method that they preach, that they are doing. Allan has been a musician and he's going to tell you about all this much better than I can. But Allan just launched a song called Brother Martin with his co-artist creator, Mike Rowe, and they have a project called Incremental Progress. And Allan went through such an amazing process to release this song, to create this. He is the living example that if you can hear my voice, I want you to see how all of this is possible. And I can't wait to ask Allan so many questions. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Too Late to Quit podcast, Mr. Allan Finn.
Yeah, thanks, man. I really appreciate that introduction. I hope I can live up to it. It's pretty cool being here. You definitely had a big part in this whole thing as far as the song you mentioned, and so I'm very grateful and can't wait to get started. So, what can we talk about? What do you want to start with?
So, I wanna go way, way back,
Okay.
because Allan and I have a pretty incredible musical history. In New York, I was involved with several different programs, and one of them was through a program that would connect musicians with people who are actually in not just hospice, but were literally on their last moments on the planet. And they invited musicians to come and perform music in the background, in the hallways, to give people, as they were spending their last moments with their families, a peaceful vibe. And this was, I believe, I don't think I'd met you much earlier before this moment, we were doing these super intense things, and what I was always impressed by was the fact you were always willing to do it, and I have this super distinct memory of playing my acoustic guitar. And what were you was it the clarinet?
I think I brought the flute that time because it fit in my
The
bag.
flute, the flute, yeah. And I remember you and I were playing this instrumental, song, and we could hear, slight conversations, but you and I knew exactly what was going on, and it was very cool to be able to experience something like that with another musician. I think that for me always fortified the fact that we had this connection, and you have always, what I have seen
Mhm.
in performing with you, is that you've always had this ability to blend in perfectly. You always know where to find those moments to support the song, where to solo. And I mean, I remember playing on a rooftop with you. I
Yeah,
remember playing
great.
at your brother's wedding. We have played at these
Mhm.
super significant events, and I've always been so curious to talk to you about your musical roots, because there's something, whatever that magical language is of music,
Mhm.
I feel you speak it fluently, and I'm curious to know, how that all started. Can you kinda take me to the beginning? What's your very first musical memory?
Very first musical memory is probably picking up my mom's flute when I was, I don't know, 7, 8, something, just laying around, and I'm just, trying to blow into it. I think she gave me the advice of, like, blow into a bottle, basically, which worked. At least it got something happening. And just messing around with it for a little bit, and it didn't end up taking at all, really. Just once in a while, I go pick it up every, I don't know, few weeks is one of the things kids do to entertain themselves. And it never really went anywhere, except for just some cool sounds. But that was probably the earliest thing I remember. I may have plucked her guitar a couple times too. That's definitely never gone anywhere because I'm a horrible guitar player. But luckily, I know a few good ones. Present company, of course, included. But basically, it's hard to say. I was thinking about this when we were talking about, you kind of having me think about my background and just a little bit to get prepared for this. Nothing official, but looking back, it's an interesting story because it's kind of a lot of things that seem random that kind of all fit together, and now I feel have come together a lot more, especially I'd say the last well, it's kind of it's been an evolution. So I'd say like 20 years ago when I met you, maybe 25 years ago, I kind of started getting into this, getting away from this formal training that I had because really, the beginnings were with my grandfather, Mac Becker. He was a big band leader down here, and he was also in New York and Chicago for a while. And he ended up actually kind of cool thing was that he was in the house band for Jackie Gleason's theater for a actual Jackie Gleason show for a couple seasons. He's somewhere we have the old pin from that Jackie gave them at the holiday time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And he was a great musician. He wasn't a phenomenal and I don't consider myself that either because I know some, not like a virtuosic musician, but a great musician who could blend. And one of the cool quotes about Mac, my grandpa Max Becker, but Mac Becker is his stage name. That's what we always called him, Grandpa Mac. Was that it was in Downbeat magazine. They did a story on one of his old bands when he was much younger. He was a sideman in a group in Chicago, and one of the quotes was one of the guys in the band like plays music and I don't know. I don't think they put the cat down. It was like not talks boring, but basically he talks like academically and plays well, but Mac like just talk, Mac basically like BS. Mac is like can flow with anything as far as his words. And he plays amazing, like, so it was kind of an interesting flip on that, you think that the guy who's studying more has it down, but I guess he made it look good without looking like he was trying too hard, which is a
Uh-huh.
talent, and I can't say I was born with that part, but I can say that through my journey, which started formally, and I got into school band, and that for me was a big thing. It's not I don't think it's a traditional rock band route, although maybe you've interviewed other people with that background, but, I was playing saxophone eventually was my first real instrument, And it was because of him. Like he'd always invite all the grandkids whenever we were over, like my cousins and things. To like he would always be playing saxophone around us, and he'd always say, "Hey, whenever anyone's ready, you want to play an instrument, let me know which one." And
Oh,
um,
wow.
yeah, and it was kind of cool. And nobody really took him up on it too much. My cousin Andrew is older by 6 months, and maybe talk about him a little bit later too. He did actually want to play drums, which my grandfather didn't play, but he got him lessons, and so that was pretty cool. And we got we never got together as a band. I wish we had more. We weren't living close enough to do that all the time, but a regular, we did play together a little bit. But Mac basically was just playing his beautiful saxophone music, and he was from the tradition of society music, where you would play a melody, you would note a melody, but he'd be able to harmonize it so many different ways, and it would sound like you're playing with an orchestra with just one other person. And so he would make my like when I was starting, we'd be playing like Mary Had a Little Lamb, and it would sound like I was performing like on stage somewhere because this guy was just making it all sound so great before we had all these like play alongs and all that kind of stuff. So that was where I got started. He was very formal. Our background is that side of the family is all Russian background, and I think we're like fourth generation classical musician. He was not. He bucked it and got some flack from his dad for being a jazz guy, like first guy in the family. Also didn't play cornet. All of them played trumpet or cornet or bugle, one of those, and they were in like the Russian orchestras and things like that. I don't know if they were in famous ones or not, but they were good musicians for family for a few generations. And then he switched it up, skipped to my mom. She played a little bit in high school for fun and stuff, but then I got back into it. And he just formally taught me the very basics, like just how to read notes, read what's on the page. We taught, maybe he played a little bit for me of like jazz style and talked a little bit about that, but not any of the like behind the scenes stuff that you really need to put into play to be able to improvise well or any of that kind of stuff. That kind of came later when I went to high school, and I ended up just Forrest Gumping it into like one of the most amazing high school bands in the country. And or maybe not, maybe it was guided. I think that more looking back, but it just ended up like I could have been in any band, and it could have been a band director who didn't care or didn't impress or inspire. But I got a great band director, Mark Humphreys, still one of my heroes, and I refer to him as my band dad. He was just here working with my kids the other day. It was a really cool experience at school teaching the band. But he developed a great band, and some of the guys in that band are, pretty well known musicians now. In fact, one of them even has a trumpet that was just designed after him.
Oh my
So it's
gosh.
pretty cool. Yeah, he's a top musician in the Airmen and Note band, like which is the top military band in the country for jazz. He's like top trumpet player in there. I've got another guy who's North Florida North Florida saxophone professor, amazing. Like he's on YouTube playing Cherokee in all 12 keys and burning it up, and like he was my big inspiration for me growing up too. So all these guys kind of came together, and I was just like, wow, this is awesome. Like I'm sitting in high school. I was a very shy kid. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was kind of bullied a little bit because I just didn't like know how to stand up for myself well at the time. And so it was like, it was just an outlet for me. And for me, it was like a big deal. Like I really do think band in a way saved my life. I mean, I had good family. I don't feel like I would have ended up on the streets or anything, but I would have probably ended up being an accountant or no, just kidding. If you're an accountant, no offense. But no, and I need you guys, by the way. So thank
We
you for
love our accountants.
we do love our accounts. But no, for me, I couldn't do that job the way my brain works, and I wouldn't have known that back then. And I would have not, socially speaking, I would have been in trouble. So it helped me. I don't know if I'm out of trouble with that, but it definitely helped me get through some hard times and learn some skills and make some great friends that I still have now. And just do some great playing. I always felt like the best place was, and part of that, like I said, Forrest Gumped it into it, was that I was the only saxophone player that made the second band. There was only one jazz band, one great symphonic band that my wife was in at the time, and my current wife, we were friends back then in high school. And but the other thing was that before that, I mean, there was only like one little tiny class of kids that didn't quite make it into that top symphonic band, and it turned out that one of the lead tenor players was a big football guy, and he ended up going full time on the team and getting a big spot on the team, and then he had to kind of give up his position in jazz band because it was much of a time commitment working out in the mornings and stuff. So because of that, everyone shifted into a new spot, and they needed somebody, and so they're like, okay, let's try this freshman kid out. think I was the only freshman in the band, and they gave me a warm welcome. It was a nice thing. I was sweating my ass off because I was trying to, like, keep up with these guys that were all playing circles around me.
Oh,
But
wow.
yeah, but it was fun. I mean, and so what I was gonna say, or initially, was that that was a great place to be, and I've always kinda taken that lesson as of be the I mean, not that you aspire to be this, but it's a great place to start, to be the weakest person in a group, because you're
Mhm,
surrounded by such great musicians that they're gonna cause you to rise to that level.
mhm.
And so from that experience, I think I was motivated to start really shedding and getting into it, and then I really got into it. The jazz thing I really got into heavy, to where I was exclusively, which is very common for like a 14 to 17-year-old boy, only listening to 1930s to 1970s
Oh,
music that was jazz.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
for a while, and obviously I wouldn't be here if that hadn't shifted a little at some point. But yeah, that I was digging in, man, because I mean, I was listening to this guy Todd Del Judas, the sax player I mentioned earlier, and he was just burning it up like
I'm sorry,
every
who
day. It was yeah, man.
what's the sax player's name?
Todd Del Judas, if you guys check
Uh-huh.
him out, he's at the University of North Florida currently. He's also a phenomenal clarinetist, just just a genius, really, and like, but not just a genius, like a genius who practiced really hard, like the ones that make it, and just can do it, could do so much, and it was just an inspiration. Like that being there, it was like I imagine, like if you were to just sit in a room, I don't know who your well, I know some of your heroes and things, but if you're just there with, like, let's say a great guitar player, like
Mhm.
I don't know, Eric Clapton. You just, like, were in the room with Eric Clapton every morning for, like, an hour, you know?
Wow,
You know what
okay.
I'm saying? And I know I'm exaggerating a little, he was a kid, he still had places to go from where he was,
Wow.
but seriously, it was that sound and that, like, intensity that you're like, "Holy crap," like, I wanna be here every day. It was a very cool thing. It was just automatic, and so being part of that was amazing, and at least for me, and then from there, I went to a great college where I actually started to learn how to actually do some things. It was Florida State University, had a really good school of music, especially for education. It wasn't, again, it's not like University of Miami, where a lot of these guys ended up going, is one of the better schools
Mhm.
for jazz and for commercial music. But I liked that stuff. But I knew I wanted to teach. My band director kind of guided me into that. Like, what do you think you're going to do with your life? And I was always sort of thinking about how to get better in the laziest way possible. So, so how can I practice the least and still achieve something? So I was for whatever that's worth. I think it's shifted a bit too, but in different ways. But anyway,
Well,
that
so
was a
I'm
great school.
if I can just we can just pause for a second. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
yeah, yeah.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah,
So,
man.
first off,
Mhm.
I've never heard that term "Forrest Gumped my way through." I think it's beautiful. I'm going to use that.
Sure thing.
You said it it really, it struck me when you said that. You said 2 things. You
Mhm.
said that you had Forrest Gumped your way through that and that band saved your life, and when the way you said it, it didn't feel like you were saying it lightly.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Mhm.
I think, that was a really I've seen that movie so many times. And the way you said it, it seems like it's very normal for you, but I
Mhm.
know a lot of people aspire to be that because that entails a lot of jumping and hoping the net will appear. Have you always been like that, or was that something you found that you naturally did or you developed?
Well, I wish I could say I was more like that. I think some of my heroes that we might talk about later, if we get into that, are those people. And I actually point to you as one of those who jumps first. I think being the firstborn or whatever the case may be. I know my brothers jumped probably out of airplanes by now too, but I've been inspired by people like him and you and different people that go for it. But I felt like, I guess, more true to that analogy, I felt like I just sort of woke up and here I am in like this great situation. I was thinking more of the parts where he ends up like, being a millionaire, or just, that's, at least that's taken care of,
Yeah, yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. So I'm not saying that I, never had any courage about any of that stuff. I mean, even performing, definitely had to get myself out of being a shy kid to being in front of people and doing that. And I think I do draw a lot of strength in that from being a teacher, because I feel like I have to be a good model. So even if I'm not feeling it, I try to get out there and do what I feel the kids should be doing, and trying to, just show them like it's okay. We can do this. We can, even if we fall on our face, we get up and do it again. But But as far as yeah, I think I'm sorry to disappoint, but I think I meant more of that. Like I just kind of had a very lucky, and I would probably, knowing my beliefs, I probably would say more of a guided sort of like,
Mm.
especially looking at who I've been able to work with as students and how they're doing. That the whole chain of events that got me from there to here required some guidance from, I believe, a higher power. I mean, so that's my thing, but not to get, and that's it. I'm pretty
No, we can go there. I'm just you brought something up that's super important to me and that I'm super passionate about. You mentioned the topic of bullying.
Mhm,
And I just want to acknowledge the fact of how uh, open, honest, and forthright you were when you said that. When you said, I wasn't at the time, I was learning how to stand up for myself, and I
yeah,
see. I spend a lot of time online on TikTok, on Instagram,
mhm,
and I see this interesting thing that's happened in the comments section
mhm,
where there will be an innocent creator putting out very innocent, feel good content, and
mhm.
there will be a competition amongst hundreds of thousands of users, people watching, to see who can write the most horrific comment.
Wow.
And I've seen,
Huh.
um, people write things like, "This is why we need to bring bullying back."
Oh, jeez.
Um, and I see these things that are written by people who have, a
Mm,
faceless profile,
mhm,
and I don't know if it's said for the likes because there will always be a little heart icon next to the person's comment, and I've seen some of them had
mhm.
upwards of 20, 30,000 likes,
Wow.
calling for something very horrible to happen. And
Yeah.
I often wonder the people that write that if they were either bullies or are bullies or were
Mhm,
bullied, but
mhm,
as someone
mhm.
who was bullied as well, it's
Yeah.
such a I've read often online that and I was never in band in school. I
Mhm.
didn't start playing guitar till my senior year, but
So
I've been told that there's a transformation that when you see a student, I guess before they enter band and the person that they are in the band is
mhm,
where they're who they really are, where they can really shine with the personality they have, the person that they truly are, where they feel in uh, that area, that arena where they feel very safe. Is that something? Because it strikes me as
mhm.
really impressive that as a freshman,
Right.
and I'm guessing most of those people were sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Yes.
What can you help me understand? And I'd love for you to
Mhm.
share with the audience.
Sure.
What has your experience been like as somebody who dealt with bullying and then experienced band life? What was that like?
It was like coming home. It was like I found my people, I just, I went to a new I think part of it was I switched schools when I was in middle school. My parents looking out for me, and thank God they did, put me in a new school, Nova. I was going to a neighborhood school before that where I had a couple, I had some friends from the neighborhood growing up a little bit. And then it was a new environment. I wasn't like the guy to go socially step and make a lot of friends initially, just didn't have those skills, that skill set, and I had some insecurity stuff. So whatever people came to me, I'd made friends over time just by situations, or my parents introduced it, whatever kids do when they're little to make friends. And then when I was out of that and in a new place, I think it's probably just body language, whatever. I'm not comfortable, and then I guess the sharks come around looking for whatever their motivation is.
Mhm,
So it wasn't horrible. This is one, I guess, a lifetime movie story, luckily for me. And I wasn't ever a small kid. I was like a mid-size or bigger. So
mhm,
at least with my peers at my school. So I didn't feel like I was an easy target, and I think that might have helped me out a little bit. But I do think, yeah, the right person at the wrong time, took advantage of the situation. And it was mostly when I was new, sixth grade. But then once you get that mentality of, okay, now I got to look out for people. Now I got to, then it doesn't help you. It didn't help me reach out to more people. Luckily, I
mhm,
did get into middle school band, and I had a little bit of camaraderie there, but it wasn't the same as when I found home, like I said, when I stepped into high school, for especially when I got recognition of, okay, this kid's good enough, whatever, even if he's just barely good enough, and we need him or whatever the desperate situation is that they didn't tell me. Of course, they tried to make me feel good because a good band director will always try to recruit without making somebody feel bad, or just they want you there. So
Mhm.
you're the new kid. They're trying to look out for you, which he very much did. But yeah, I mean, and that's part of it too. Mark Humphreys, he introduced me right away to the best players, the oldest players, the seniors were trying to tutor me a little bit, just
Mhm.
unofficially in class to help me out with this and that. And so I felt like, okay, I was this nobody who like kids were picking on, and now I'm important. This band is not complete without this kid on second tenor.
Mm.
And then of course socially I felt good. I was now kind of, I don't know, this is probably just in my own head, but it helped my confidence that I felt like, okay, now I'm kind of like a little bit up there in, I guess, status or whatever you want. I guess that was an ego thing at the time, but
Mhm.
like I'm a better player than some of these guys now. Not it didn't go to my head crazy. I didn't go crazy with it, but like to where I was confident enough that now I'm going to go talk to my friends in the other group, or that I'm going to make some new friends. And so I think that all just helped. And also, band kids are typically very goofy.
Mhm.
they're real. I mean, all the stories on TV, if anybody ever, most of them. I don't know about the band camp ones, all the way from the American Pie movies, but most of the stories, I'm going to take the fifth on some stories, but they're mostly we're just corny, cool, fun kids, intelligent. Most of them, a lot of them are, because that part of your brain is developed. Like wordplay, I think is more normal, and you say something silly or cheesy. Oh yeah, we might give each other a hard time in jest, but it's obvious that it's not to put somebody down. And I think we have each other's back. When you make
Mm.
music with somebody, there's something very intimate about that, in the sense that you're getting beyond words in a way, but you still have to communicate, whether and it's nonverbal, it's this oral thing. You're blending your sounds, depending on what you're trying to do. But this is just like the band experience, not even getting into like the rock band and the composing and all that yet. But you're trying to create this beautiful thing. You might not even know somebody. If you end up in an honors band, it could be 150 people that never met each other, and now you're trying to, in 3 days or whatever, put on this beautiful concert with all these people you've never met. And you've got to have some commonality that you all want to be part of this thing and make it great, and they do typically, and so it works. But it definitely is a unique experience. I think it's a worthwhile one. I'm a big supporter in any way I can, especially as a teacher. And anytime I'm not there, I'm not giving 100%. I feel like I'm robbing those kids of something. And
Mhm.
I always look up to the people that have mentored me, and they kick my ass sometimes. By the way, still.
Well, so can you
I
walk me
let
through
them
that
be.
from going to playing so is, who in your family is musical?
So I think it's kind of, well, okay, we don't have any Mozarts, I'll say that, but and I say that as somebody who's been working with a few of them as of late. It's pretty
Uh-huh,
amazing, but
uh-huh.
I will say that we have some gifts. I like to I haven't said this to my kids yet, but one day I'd like to have the discussion of what's your musical superpower with everybody in the room.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, right. And I've determined that mine is twofold, and it's not all that impressive, but it's worked for me. One of them is that I seem to be able to, it's kind of like the riding a bicycle thing. Like I have had a period in my life where I put my sax down for over an entire year since I've been into it.
Mhm,
And that sucked, but that was just first year teacher and not having time or making time or whatever the case was. And then I picked it back up, and I'm not saying I was like ready to rock and roll in Carnegie Hall, but it only took me maybe a couple weeks to get back to almost full shape. So
wow.
yeah, so the it's probably my instrument. I think if I was a guitar player, maybe a piano player, it's requiring different kinds of coordination, it might not be the same case. But for saxophone, it's just a really natural feel. I feel like I can practice away from the horn and actually get pretty accurate with like just playing literally air sax. I'm not going to enter any of those Japanese competitions anytime soon, but
Uh-huh.
I'll probably lose. But I do think that I can just sort of feel the horn at any time I want, like at will. And I've been able to do that for quite a while. So that was developed, but I think that there must have been some natural aptitude for that.
Can
And
you
then,
I'm sorry, can you say
yeah, yeah,
you're saying you're dropping so much gold. I just wanna just,
that's fine.
grab you for a second.
Yeah.
You said, you could feel the horn?
Yeah, like,
Can you expound on that a little? I think I'd really love people to hear your thoughts on that. That's a very, very profound statement. I'd love you to dig into that.
Sure. Let me think about it. So, essentially, if like you've got the instrument in your hand, which I have mine right here, so I can make. I don't know if I'll demonstrate too much playing on. We'll see.
Go
I will
for it. This is amazing. That's
see.
great. Absolutely.
but I don't know if I warmed up though. So yeah, not so pretty. So don't record that one and put it on YouTube. Oh, wait a second. Anyway, all right. So just to demonstrate my point is that if you can hear a beautiful key click, so my fingers are in the right position. Saxophone has only one. You
Uh-huh.
don't. It's not like piano or guitar where you're moving your hands all over a fretboard or
Uh-huh.
so it's pretty much once you're in that position, you stretch your pinkies for a couple things, use your palms for a couple things. That's it though.
Mm.
So I'm able to, and I'm not. This isn't just not me. I'm sure there's many musicians who can do this, but I can walk away from my instrument, and if I have a starting pitch, it helps. It's B flat concert. So if I do that, da 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 do da da da, da 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 da, etc. So
Oh,
that is something
wow.
that we can train and that we do train. I teach my kids
Uh-huh.
to do that. But what I was kind of referring to more was that I can I can not I can practice on my instrument to a large degree. Now it's not perfect and I can't, do it for everyone because obviously the sound needs work. You just heard because I had to be warmed up, etc. But yeah, so
But
that's kind of what
it's
I'm
even that little small this is I remember the very first time that I heard you play. The it's very soulful. Every time I've heard you play, there's always this you'll bend a note a certain way. There's the way you're breathing into that. It's always to me felt very, very honest and very, very real and very soulful.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of that comes from the jazz tradition. Had I not studied that, I think you would be missing some, or I would be missing some of that in my playing.
Mhm.
But yeah, it really depends on what I'm doing. Obviously, that wouldn't be appropriate for like a classical piece, probably. But depending on what it is, and I like to be able to shift gears and try. I find it interesting to play a lot of different genres. Although, I am gravitating more writing wise, typically to what the pop thing or the rock thing or whatever you define that as. But yeah, man. So that was one of my musical quote unquote superpowers. It's just that I can be away from it for a while, come back to
Wow.
it, and it comes back pretty quick. Not my piano. It's got to be saxophone. Maybe
Uh-huh.
flute, clarinet. Okay, but
Mhm.
yeah, the woodwinds for me. But the other thing is that I can hear sometimes, frequently, I can hear a rhythm, and sometimes lyrics will be suggested in my head, like for that
Really?
rhythm. Yeah, sometimes. So that's pretty useful as a songwriter. And sometimes I'll do it for fun, like with my, and I don't want to demonstrate that 'cause maybe it'll come out later today. But I feel I'm putting myself on the spot, which
Wait, wait, wait. So just to verify, so you're not without just kind of like if you're sitting in a room in silence, you will hear like a percussive rhythm or what is it
yes, yeah, it
what
could
like
be
what instrument is creating the rhythm and what instruments are creating the melodies?
a percussive one. It could be just like it might not always be lyrical. Sometimes it'll suggest a melody,
Mhm.
but usually I can put some words to it pretty quickly. Just like the syllables just seem to fall into place.
Mhm.
So that's been useful, and also it's interesting. And I think I was born a little too late because my cousin, I don't, we're not. He's my second cousin. I don't think there's any enough blood there to to grant that power. But he was working as I think one of the vice presidents of ASCAP for a while in like the Northeast or something. He went to school.
Ah.
He was very talented. I don't know Mozart powers or anything, but he he played trumpet and he ended up going to Manhattan School of Music, which is one of the best schools for music in the country. And he ended up getting this cool gig, which I've always been jealous of, where he went around basically busting people for copyright infringement. I mean, that doesn't sound cool. Like the police, the police part's not cool, but it was monetary. So basically, he was going around to ASCAP saying, "Hey, you stole that dude's song," and he would do it by they would just send him tunes, and he would hear it enough, and he would know like that it was from another tune. This was before the internet and all the gazillion tunes out there,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so I thought that was and he made a decent living at it. So I thought it was a pretty cool gig. And so sometimes I can do that. Like it doesn't help anymore, but for money, but it's fun. Sometimes I'll hear a song, but oh, that's ripped off from this, or did you hear like Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he did some music for Moana, I noticed he had s and this is probably on purpose, it's pretty cool,
Mhm.
but I don't know if anybody typically would know unless they were listening, and I wish I could tell you the exact song, but basically stole a riff or a lot of a riff, from Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid, which
Mhm.
kinda makes
Mhm.
sense because 'cause they're
Mhm.
related, they're Disney, and
Sure.
maybe somebody out there talks about that, but anyway, I just heard it. I just heard it. I'm like, and it was very subtle. It wasn't like in your face. It wasn't like kind of like a Easter egg. It was kind of like the undertone of the thing or something like that. So that kind of thing is pretty fun and cool, and sometimes helps me come up with ideas, like you said, like being able to play with somebody else and come up with something that is complementary. Like I think sometimes it draws from that. Maybe this song reminds me of another song, and it's like I can pull in parts of that, things like that.
So,
Mhm.
Alan, I never knew this about you. So I was watching this Howard Stern interview with Chris Martin from Coldplay.
Okay.
Chris Martin was talking about something very similar.
Hmm.
Howard asked him, "Are you hearing music in your head right now?" I'd like to ask you that same question.
Oh.
Are you hearing music and rhythm in your head right now? Is that like a constant thing in the background?
Thankfully, no. The drugs are working. No, I'm just kidding. No, just kidding. But no, I am not, and my uncle asked me a long time ago, my Uncle Larry, who I'm pretty close with, he lives in Chicago. My brother is real close with him. He, uh he asked me once, "Do you find that you can't enjoy music because you're trained to study music?" And that was a
Mm,
great question. And I in some ways I wish that was the case because I feel like those are the best musicians in the world. But
mhm,
I also feel like that sometimes might inhibit them from being more natural about it. Like I think it's just like everything does become an exercise or and yeah, I can analyze. I teach my kids how to do that. Oh, that comes from this scale, or that come, or I hear that pattern here. But it doesn't, luckily for me, because I think it would kind of definitely put a hamper on my songwriting.
mhm,
Doesn't take the forefront of my thinking because I think it would just be too academic and get in the way at that point. I do think it's important to write from what you feel, what you think,
mhm,
and that's developed over time, and that is because I got away from the paper. Because if you're only a classically trained musician and you only read what's there, I feel like there definitely is a side of expression there that a lot of maybe rockers and jazzers don't realize. Like
mhm,
classical music is just like so square and it's just there in the box, but
mhm.
there is a lot of variation, but it's still within a lot more confines than something like jazz or rock music or jam sessions, things like that. So I feel like I would have gotten stuck more in that if I hadn't gotten away from it. So
Alan, when did you so I know you started your mom had a guitar in the house, a flute. Were there any other instruments that she had?
uh that's what I remember. That's what I
Mhm.
remember. And the guitar, I mean, literally, I was plucking the string, like, "Cool, that
Uh-huh.
sounds cool,
Uh-huh.
boing, boing," you know? I don't know how many times I don't know if they thought it sounded cool at some point, but, I know the neighbors didn't think that the sax sounded cool for a while.
Ah,
My dad mentioned that at one point, one of them said, "Oh, your son's been practicing a lot, he's sounding better."
just a quick aside, I think I love your parents. I think I've had a chance to hang out with both of them. I think they're so cool. Your mom always, whenever I post stuff, she always likes it, always interacts with it. It's so neat for me. I didn't know that. I didn't know that she played guitar, that she had a flute. How old were you when you start taking lessons, or what was that evolution from that day to a joining band as a freshman, being invited?
That's a great question. I think it was, well, I was messing with her flute, like I said, 7, 8, 9, probably as any younger than that, you can't really hold the instrument correctly. But she
Uh-huh.
did show me like the basics, and that was it. Like she's like, "Here's how you hold it. Have fun." As far as I remember, yeah, she might have played like "Mary Had a Little Lamb" for me, or something, but she was out of shape on it too. And she had played it in high school. She had played saxophone in high school, and that saxophone was the one I started on. It was actually also my grandfather's first sax. So it's kind of cool. It's three generations that played it. More mom is a hobby. She played a high school marching band. I don't know why or how that happened because it was such a nice instrument.
Mhm.
but it was what it was, and it still held up. It was pretty. Maybe that's why it was kind of a beater too. Like it take a beating,
Mhm.
but it's a cool horn. It's referred to, which I always thought was cool, especially in high school when I started playing it. Well, played it more. It's the Naked Lady model, so it's a Naked Lady Con 6M,
Mhm.
and that's because there's literally a naked lady carved into it, but not too naked, like 1930s naked,
Okay, okay, right, right. A bunch of fig leaves somewhere.
something like that. Yeah,
Right.
I think it was like just a bust, like from
Okay.
nibble this up. We won't get more time. I don't know how like rated you are here, so I'll keep it pretty
No,
PG.
you're absolutely free to talk about whatever you want.
No, that's cool. And that was the last time you had Allan on. No, just kidding. So, so anyway, basically that horn got through the family, but the really cool thing is that I have a picture somewhere that somebody found with like one of these, family trees online. And well, my grandfather is 13 years old playing professionally in the Catskill Mountains in New York with this same saxophone. And
Oh,
that's pretty
wow.
cool. Yeah, and I was like, "What?" Like, I heard those stories, but it was cool to see a picture of him, and I know it's nice to have that same horn, but also just 13 years old professional, and that was a thing, I guess,
Mm,
and I used to think that was, like, a made up thing, but apparently I've met some kids since then that are amazing musicians, better than me, so literally. So, it's definitely possible. So he probably, if anybody had any Mozart at all in them, it was him, because he didn't practice that much, and he got by pretty nicely. But you know, it's all good. It all came around, and so yeah. Let me see. That was the instrument I started on, and it went like this. He invited us all to play. I kind of felt a little guilty. Nobody was taking him up on. You could tell he wanted to pass this on.
yeah, sure.
So I don't know if that was the right motivation, but this is what happened. So this is part of the Forrest Gumping of it all. But so yeah, basically, I'm like, okay, I was very close with him. He's a great person, great grandfather, loved us all. We all knew that, and very demonstrative with that. And so yeah, I'm like, for sure, let me try it. And so I did, and it was a little painful because there's something called practice that you're supposed to do that I I did not do, and he did get disappointed a few times. In fact, a few times we went to visit. They lived maybe like for a little while. They lived in North Miami. They lived probably half an hour away from us,
Okay.
and we so when we came on occasion, maybe like once a month or so, that was the deal. I was supposed to bring the horn in practice, and usually I did, but a couple times I think I don't know what it was. I just absent-minded and I didn't bring it, and so he got very disappointed the one time I didn't bring it at all, and he a little sarcastic about it and stuff, and I could
Mm,
tell he was frustrated. And but we didn't give up, and I brought it another time and I started it back up. But basically, I didn't really appreciate it until that social side kicked in with the band. I started a little bit late. Kids usually start in 6th grade in public school, and here where I teach, they start in 4th, and I started in 7th, like the summer before 7th, basically. He started me with some lessons that summer. And so I was catching up, and then it was a middle school group that wasn't that great, and the teacher was okay, but it wasn't inspirational like the high school thing. So I had a lot of catching up to do when I did get to high school. But basically, I started off there in middle school, and it was cool. It was the music. I was like, okay, it's nice to play with other people at least. But I didn't practice except for when I really had to, like for a concert or something.
mhm.
And so that was frustrating to him. I know he was into it. He wanted to pass that on. Who knows? I don't know if I have to assume he practiced a little bit at that age because he was playing professionally, so that must have happened at some point. But the deal with him and me was always that I'm gonna let you borrow this horn, but the deal is you can never sell it,
Mm,
and you can only keep it as long as you practice.
wow.
So yeah, so that was pretty cool, and I ended up being the only one in the family, except for my cousin Andrew, that really got into it. I think his sister. We only have a few cousins. It was a small family,
Mhm.
very tight. But I think his sister played flute for like 6 months or something, and then and my aunt played clarinet for a little while. But nobody got into it. And then Andrew played drums through college, and he got into it pretty good. But more as like a rocker, like just let me show up, party. Florida State. I'm the drummer. I'm gonna play anything I can, and he would just show up and have fun with people. And he was very talented. He's another one that didn't have to really practice that much, but it just kind of came to him. But he didn't refine it as much as he could have, like, if he
Mhm.
had dug in. But it was fine. It was what he wanted, and it's really cool. I think he's back in a band now, and I'm very happy for him about that. And so I ended up getting eventually all of my grandfather's instruments, basically. My
Oh,
cousin Jerry,
wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was That was interesting, and it was pretty cool, and I kept my promise. I did There's one horn out there that I didn't sell, but I let my very good student have because he was so good and into it, and I'm like, "Okay." His grandfather was also a jazz guy. I think he's recorded out there too. So I'm
Okay.
like, "You know what? I think this will be okay. I don't think I'll get haunted for this one."
It's always a good barometer, like, of haunting, on
Exactly.
when you make a decision. I love that.
Right? So that horn's currently with Justin Mignotti, who better keep playing it, otherwise he has to give it back to you.
You heard it here first, folks. Okay.
Right? But
So
no,
this
he's
brings us to a very special part of the Too Late to Quit podcast, where I have a couple of surprise questions for you from people that you know. This
ah,
question comes into listener Robert Finn,
nice.
and he would like to ask his brother. I understand music runs in your family, at least as far back as your great grandfather. I love how he's wording as a this. That was kind of my. I don't know. He was trying to make it very neutral. Having spent your career in music performance and music education, have you seen any major shift in the way music is passed on to the next generation with the advent of social media and the information age?
Wow. Damn, for
Nice
Robert.
question,
Yeah, I was
Rob.
gonna say, man, he thought about that one. No, he's a thinker, that kid. Well, hmm. Well, for sure. Uh, in the way that it's been passed on, though, is he talking? I don't know if he inferred to you. Is he talking more about like from like father to son, or is he talking more about like the way that we pass the traditions on to other students down, like not necessarily related?
I mean, I think it could apply to either, really. This question feels very open.
Okay. Well, it's cool that somewhere out there I have. Actually, I know I do have a cassette, but also somewhere there's some reel to reels of my grandfather playing at parties and clubs and things like that. And
Oh,
that's pretty
wow.
cool to check out. Yeah, in fact, I fell away from this, but when I was more into jazz, I thought when I was younger, I was like, maybe someday I'll do like kind of what Natalie Cole did with Nat Cole, where they did Unforgettable, and she brought back some hits, And so maybe
Yeah. Oh, wow. That would be amazing.
it would, and if it's not yet deteriorated, I'm hoping that might still be a possibility. We'll
Oh,
see. We'll see.
wow. That would be super cool.
Yeah. So that would be a lot of fun. So that is a cachet of stuff that you know what, I got to hear, which was cool that my uncle, his son recorded it because, I never really knew, like, he always, like I told you, like, he made things sound so sweet and melodic, and he was like, I would have called him like a balladeer almost because he always liked to play like very long, like sweet things, and like he would decorate, but he wasn't a virtuoso to any measure. But I do have him playing on a couple of things that he really was starting to burn it up a little bit. And I was like, all right. I was like, cool, Grandpa, you got it. Like, it was nice to know that he had that side to him too, because I didn't get to hear that. So in
Uh-huh.
that way, Robbie Finn, yes, I do feel like that was a cool thing, and it is a cool thing, and of course, so much easier now.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, if somebody wanted to get bogged down in all my minutia I've ever recorded, they probably could, but but I pity the poor fool that gets stuck on that job from the CIA, so I'm sorry.
So on that topic, Alan, I'm curious. So can you because one of the reasons why I started this podcast is that I wanted people to know that if they have that twinkling in their eye or they've always wanted to begin to pursue music, or if they have a job that they do during the day, I
Mhm.
find that you are an amazing person in the way that you are also able to manage all of your time. Can you walk me through your daily life and then how you incorporate your songwriting and the project you have, incremental progress? I'm very curious to know how all of your worlds meld together and how you separate that. I want somebody who's listening who's thinking, look, I have no time, I have absolutely
Mhm.
no time. I'd love for them to hear you, because for me it's a perfect example of how you make time. If you could share that.
Okay. Well, first of all, we're honest. We've been friends a long time, so I'm not gonna totally discount what you said at all, but I am gonna put a caveat there, which is that I am struggling quite a lot with that right now. In that it has been hard to balance, but I will say to your point, that refuse to let it die, and because of you, man, I'll tell you, you and a few people in my life, honestly, you guys have been stoking that flame that, like, it grows to an ember sometimes because I'm so busy. But then I get inspired by people like you who are doing what you love, and finding and just encouraging. You're just encouraging. I mean, I could have been sitting on that song more, and
Mhm.
here I'm at like over 200 hits on YouTube. And the truth is, I have great hopes for this song. And
Can you talk, a little bit about that song? I'd love for you to
sure,
talk about
sure.
it.
And
Yeah.
then I definitely want to come back to what you said because it's very
Please.
important.
Yeah.
So so the song is, and this is a good example actually, so it's kind of explaining the other question at the same time. So Mike Rowe and I have been friends for a very long time. We met in the saxophone studio at Florida State. He came in a couple of years later, transferring from Miami-Dade College, and very much didn't fit the mold of what they were doing there classically, but was such a very talented kid. Like he plays guitar, he plays everything on the recording basically for Brother Martin. Also known as Another Day, Just Another Day. But he, for a long time, we've been in bands, we've been playing, and ever since we got reconnected about a year out of college, I found he was a year behind me. So when he got back to Miami, we go hang out sometimes, and he had a couple different bands over the course of time that I come sit in with and jam with, and one of them I was part of the band. The first one I was kind of just to like come hang out with us and play, and so it's been really important for me as a musician, as a human, to get that expression out. And so for a long time, depending on what was going on in my personal life and my commitments there and my professional life, there's been periods where I had a lot more time, and I was all the time I could hanging out, jamming, not just with him, but primarily with him. The other side of my musical life would be jazz and anything I could, like, I
Mhm.
pick up groups here and there I got invited to
Mhm.
do. There's one other recording of me somewhere out there, probably more than one that I don't want to know about, but at least one where I'm labeled, and I know it's called. It's when I was playing with the Absolute Jazz Big Band. Steve Salo is a good drummer down here, and he put
Uh-huh.
together a great group. And I'm playing a tenor solo on that, and I was actually pretty decently proud of that. I didn't mind that being out there. It's not amazing, but I liked it. It's pretty good. So it's on a tune called Diddle Addle. But anyway, besides that side of what I did, it was mostly with Mike, and we were developing our musical writing and our, but very informally. It was mostly through jam sessions. It was mostly through playing together. And as we've gotten older, I hate to say it because time is so valuable, and we've tried to refocus, but we've gotten more and more. It's become
Mhm.
more and more social, not less
Mhm.
musical, but there's an awful lot of goofing off happening in the playing, and that's okay. It's been great for stress, and it's motivating, but also, sometimes we're very limited, so we just need to dig in and do it. Um, so where am I going with all this? Just basically, it's just been a development over time of doing that. And so I remember actually reading something that you wrote, or maybe it was an email or text to me or something, but um, or maybe it was something you posted out there about how, I think it was something you posted actually maybe on YouTube, about how your journey and how you, if you kept up the pace you were going, you'd be like releasing like an album every decade or something. And that's exactly the pace we've been going.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, yeah.
Except we didn't release one in 2 decades. So you actually you're winning that race.
Uh-huh.
So so that struck a chord with me, and I think a little bit. I definitely played that for him. Like, check it out, man. We got to do something about this. So so we've been writing a little bit. I would love to say I've got this. I'm sitting on this treasure trove of 50 or 100 tunes. No, that's
Mhm.
definitely not the case. We've sat on the process of how to work together really well for a long time, and if we can get rid of the trim the fat part of that, I think we'll be able to start putting out a lot more tunes. Unfortunately, currently we're not able to meet much just because my I'm not going to go into a whole lot of that right now, but just life is what it is.
Mhm.
And I'm big time important to me as family, and so I'm with my daughter a lot, and that it's awesome and wonderful. I wouldn't change it for anything. But it's we're looking for ways to get together. So that thank you for the push because that did get us together a little bit. I even brought my girl with me. I'm like, nothing's stopping us. She was a really good audience and
Oh,
watched us do the
wow.
editing and all that. Yeah. And for 6 years old, I'll give it to her. At some point, I had to bribe her with hamburgers and ice cream, but we made it. So, but and it's cool to have her around it. I hope she picks up some of the love for that. Maybe we'll see. I don't, I'm not going to push it on her, but anyway, to not get too far off track.
Well, so
Um,
how did that song what was the
yes,
initial
yes.
C? Did it come
Okay.
out of a goofy jam session? How did it it's a
No, not at all.
super beautiful song. I'd love to
Oh,
know
thank you.
the
Thank you.
story of it.
So what it was we, you know this and your audience doesn't, but we experienced a big tragedy in my family. My wife, Leanne, lost her oldest son in a car accident. I'm not so good with time, but it's about 4 years now.
Mm,
And, that was a hard hit for all of us. And right after that, luckily for us, not at all, the world got smacked with COVID. So we're coping with one thing, then we're trying
mhm,
to adjust to this, and it
mhm,
was hard, man. It was a hard time. But not to go into that too much, but because of all that, I didn't play much with Mike at that time. I think we did get together a little bit. We had a group with another good friend, that's another teacher friend of mine that sang with us, Kika, and we did some things with that group. And we were kind of the idea was that we would all record enough tunes of our own, helping each other out, that we could put on a full album of like 3 tunes here from me, three from you, and that was coming along for a while. We had another guy involved too for a little while, but that was maybe now a decade ago. Jeez, blink my eyes. And
mm.
so after COVID and everything, we had paused, and he just came over, man. He was just so supportive. He's been a great friend. He wanted to be there for us. And he's like, what can I do? Just to, like, let's hang out. Let's, cheer you guys up a little bit. And I think all it was that we're jamming in the living room. We have a piano. We had a piano at the time in there, like an electric piano. And he brought his guitar, and we're just like, what are we gonna do? Like, let's write a song. So we're doing this thing, and I don't know. Like sometimes it's hard to get started, but I was kind of like, I need to do something. Like, and today
Mhm.
was the day it was 5 years ago. I'm sorry to say, but it's 5 years ago on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So of
Mhm.
course, what's the theme? Okay, well, we both admire this person, and we think a lot of him and what he's done for the world. So I don't know what it was, and sometimes it takes a little chutzpah to just get out there and sing, "Brother Martin," just because we're just jamming it, like, out of
Yeah.
nowhere. I'm like, and then he's kinda joking, like, because we do that a lot. Unfortunately, he does it a lot worse than I do. He'll take something and extemporize on it, like, a lot, and it becomes kind of comical, and after a while, maybe not so comical,
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
when you hear a joke too many times. So I'm like, all right, let's try this. And I just kept doing it because I liked how it sounded. And I'm like, let's do something with this. And I started writing. I like wrote the first line or two, just singing it out loud. And then he started strumming because that's what. So once we had a little direction, then
I'm
it
sorry,
started
you
to
wrote
come.
the first minor the what?
The first line. The
Oh,
first line.
gotcha, okay. I thought you said minor tude. I was like, "What is this? Is this
Oh,
a musical term I don't know?" Look, please
sorry.
educate me.
So, so yeah, I wrote that, and then it just unfolds, and it was a good thing, and we got through a lot. I'd say we got through the first two and a half, probably 2.5 verses that night. I don't know how I do with choruses. I feel like they kind of are the same. Like
Uh-huh.
verses and choruses kind of blend together. But but that's all right. That's my thing, I guess, for right now. Anyway, it became something that was singable, and then we recorded that. We just always do a rough record when we did. I think we did it on somebody's phone that night.
Uh-huh.
And then we started. I'm like, look, we got to do something more with this. So at least I started using that as like a launch pad to like, all right, Leanne, how are we gonna do this? I gotta get to Mike's house a little bit. Like I gotta get there once every other week or something. So we did. So I
Yeah.
started going back over there, and we worked on it. And I think one of the questions you had posed me is about how is it working in a studio? And I guess it depends on the studio, the engineer, the musicians. Mike's all of those things.
Uh-huh.
He has a studio that I affectionately refer to. We now, but I think I started it. Death Trap Studios.
Please explain that. Why is it called Death Trap
Yes.
Studios?
Well, if you ever armor up and you are in South Florida, you should come over and check it out. If he's okay with that, I'm sure he will be. And basically, because he's decided to do a DIY project to his house to create Death Trap Studios, and so there's things hanging from the ceiling, and there's wires like loosely strewn everywhere, and there's like, it definitely is like the tech version of an Indiana Jones scene
Uh-huh.
to get in and out of
Wow.
there. It's
I
it's
love
tight,
that. I
it's tight
love that.
space. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's definitely its own thing. You will not find this anywhere else in the world, I don't think. And I don't know if that's the secret to our sound, but no, no, we're getting through with it. It's been the best studio I've had to work with, and whenever I've attempted to do it myself, it just hasn't really been the same. I will say I've only given it the old college try. I really haven't
Uh-huh.
academically sat down and worked on it like I should. So at some point, I still want to do that, at least for sketching. But
How did you
Having
go
said
from
that,
that to
yeah.
then putting out this beautiful, with a photo montage, a video on, YouTube? How did that from that initial sketch from the jam session, how bring us to actually putting it out and releasing it on YouTube?
Okay, so one of our strengths and weaknesses is that we both do have a background in classical and jazz music, and especially
Mhm.
having to do with jazz. One of the characteristics of jazz is that you can have many arrangements of the same tune. And some rockers have picked this up. I really am into Dave Matthews Band, especially when they were out newer, but I still love their stuff. And he was one of the first, I think, to release all these different live versions and jam versions of his same tunes, which I thought was really great. And definitely is a jazz thing to do. And I think I even read in an article that he's big into jazz as far as listening and stuff. So um, basically, the problem with that with us and Michael doesn't, and I love him. So when he hears this, if he hears this, hopefully he doesn't kill me for this, but he knows this too. But he has trouble stopping. Like, when's
Mm.
the right version? So he will literally have 23 versions of a bridge or something, and then I've got to help decipher which one we're going to use. And that, so you can see how this process can easily snowball out of control. And I think that sometimes happens for us. We got to be careful with that. And I can be guilty of it too, for sure. Like, I can keep tweaking things up, not quite right, not quite right. We can get really a little too nitty gritty sometimes.
So we
And
actually just got a question into the live chat from Michael. And
yeah,
Michael asks, Alan, how many versions of a bridge are too many? 100? 150? Surely there must be at least 99 different versions. Your thoughts?
is that really for Michael? Because that
That
you
is from Michael Rowe.
because Jeff, I could have seen you faking that, but yeah, Michael Rowe. Micro Row 150 would probably be too many, unless you wanna start some kind of variety show and get out of this songwriting biz.
So how did you cull that down? How did you decide the final arrangement? I think it works so beautifully. It flows so nicely. And, there's something I talked about in a previous podcast. My wife always has told me, she says, Jeff, you never know who's listening. And when I
Mm,
think about that, I know you said it kind of jokingly, or maybe
mhm,
you didn't, that you had, north of 200 listens. If you, I'd like to picture, like, say in my studio space or my room,
mhm.
200 people. Like, that's a
Okay,
lot of people.
okay,
You playing a
okay.
concert, 200 people like that, I think that's a decent crowd.
Yeah, man. That's
And I there's something very special about that song. How did you, because you both moved really fast, in order to get it out. What was that process bringing it, editing it down and getting it out?
Well, okay, so as you first asked me, how do I do this? One of the things is during certain periods, when we can, right? We have had time in the studio. We try to get it finished, and we haven't usually gotten it finished, but we have a lot of background material. We have a lot of takes. We have a lot of things that we could use if we decided to do it. And my good friend, luckily, and brother Jeff Iftikruden was like, "Yeah, man, just put it out there." So we did that,
Uh-huh.
and so I don't think that's gonna probably work for the whole album, but it was definitely a good fire starter, I would say.
Uh-huh.
I hope I want to keep that going. But anyway, that's the plan. So the answer is it was kind of already there. We had three or four more versions since the one that you heard.
Oh,
Luckily, I saved
wow.
that one on my phone because we needed that one. That was the one that was working the best. We
Okay.
considered maybe tweaking it more a little bit that day, and Mike was like, if it's going to take me more than like an hour, then it's not going to happen. And he was right, and that was a good
Uh-huh.
call. And Mike, I give a lot of credit to because he really does, I will say, the lion's share of the actual grunt work. I will be sitting there creatively, and he'll patiently listen to it, singing, which is not my forte, but trying to get things out. Or we'll talk a lot. Actually, one thing is kind of fun that we'll talk a lot about, like, oh, play it for me like this. Like like Michael Jackson did it on Thriller, this section, or we'll reference things that we both are
Oh,
familiar with,
wow.
you know,
Okay.
and so that will help us get, like, I want the feel of it to be more like that, and it doesn't mean we're gonna copy that exact thing, but the vibe. So that between that and me crooning out some interesting sounds, we we uh we managed to get through it, and then he adds what he adds, which is quite a lot. And instrumentally, he's come up with a lot of the riffs, like the piano, anything repetitive, like in the piano, that is like you could like if you were going to buy this as a piece of sheet music to play at home, like that, that's Michael. Most of the time. I mean, I might have a little input here and there, some
Mhm.
of the instrumental parts, yes, but most of it is really him. So I'm blessed and thankful to be working with him as a team a lot of times, and so that's a gift. But so we had too many versions. We luckily, you lit that fire with me. I kept pushing him. Let's do it.
Mhm.
Let's do it. I don't know that he's still 100% happy with that. Since you're listening. But I respect and I know where he's coming from, and we don't want to put anything bad out there. I told you that that version of me playing tenor sax solo on a big band is like one of the only things out there, and I'm happy
Mhm.
for that. I remember Sonny Rollins' interview where he said there's just too much bad music out there,
Yeah.
and I agree with that. And I'm, who wants? I don't want to waste someone's time unless I'm putting my best out there,
Mhm.
and my best might be a little processed, etc. Depending on the situation, but that's okay. That I'm trying to get a certain thing across to them. So, to get back to your question, basically, once we decided, yeah, we're going to do this, the big push is for this Martin Luther King Jr. Day. We don't want to wait another year to do this because it seemed timely.
Mhm.
Um, then we just got together. That one, we talked a few things over on the phone. I was like, hey, check out these suggestions Jeff was making. Thank you for those. We used some of them, whatever. But mostly that's stuff to come when we redo it. We really used what we had, and then we sat together. I sent him some photos that were royalty free, and we just quickly put that together for the day. So he did, again, I'll give him credit. He sat there. We talked about it, but he was typing in the computer and he was doing all that. So yeah, so that's it, man. I think you have to have the right team, and
Mm.
and
Mhm.
he's got a lot of skills, and it's a good thing.
I just was blown away. I was so impressed by how fast the 2 of you did that because I find it to be pretty terrifying when you're putting yourself out there literally to the entire world. You're putting your art out there. That takes a ton of courage because why is that? And I know Mike's question is, I'd say maybe 70% in jest, but
Mhm.
I really, as a musician, as a songwriter, I can really relate to that because it feels like you can go down any number of rabbit holes on where you want the song to go. And each of those versions can be very cool and they can have a different vibe. Making a decision like we're going to go down this path,
Mhm.
I think that is I was so impressed by how you did that. Can you please, for the person who's listening who might be sitting on a track in Logic or
Hmm.
whatever DAW that they're using, what
Sure.
advice would you give somebody who was in your position, who is hesitant to actually put it out and who feels kind of caught in that paralysis of versions?
Well, I think it has to come down to a feeling for you. It has to feel like it's right, or it's done enough, or it's right. I'd say don't. Well, it depends on what your goal is. You have to define what you want to do. But if you're trying to get, for me, and I think Mike is to some degree at least, this message, it was an important message. I've always, some of my heroes, maybe we can get into that if we have time later, but one of them is Bob Marley. And not necessarily my biggest influence as a songwriter, but I always loved Redemption Song. And I always felt like these
Mm,
songs of freedom is what humanity needs. One of the things we need a lot to help bolster us. Like, and so for me, like, hopefully my song will be, I don't know, well, I'm not gonna put it on that level, but whatever, the world will decide. But that was the goal. Like, let's put this out there. Like, let's try to make the world a better place through music, which is one of the powerful things that we can do. And so for me, if you were right, like if I keep sitting on this to make it the perfect product, then I might miss the boat on, like, what if we released it 5 years ago? I mean, maybe things were rough, man.
mhm,
The things
mhm.
were maybe rougher then. It's hard to say, unfortunately. But
Sure.
like, we definitely were looking at the environment that we were releasing this into 5 years ago, and like, we should get this done. We should get this done. And then now it's still, though, unfortunately, it's still relevant. So, and hopefully not for too much more, but who knows? So the point I'm trying to make is that your song may have some purpose beyond what you think, and you also have your intention of what you'd like to accomplish with it. And of course, I would like to sell it and do all those things that musicians need to do to make a living. But um, even if that doesn't happen, and I touch somebody, and I know this song has impacted some people, and I know some people at my work, if nothing else, look at me in a new light, and I think have a new respect that they didn't know that about, like that I did that, and they
Mhm.
know that I think that way, and for them that was a good thing. Um, so even if that's as much as it is, and those 200 people are sitting in that imaginary studio with me, that was beautifully put, by the way. I think that's worth it, you know. And so I'll say to somebody is, if the song means something to you, and you think it might touch even one other person, I think, or even if you don't care, you just want to hear it yourself, and use the access on YouTube. I think that's fine, you know. I think I that I stole from what's his name, the guy with the biggest, but Tim Ferriss. Tim
Mhm.
Ferriss says, like, if you make it for yourself, and if it's just for that, and it makes your life better, cool. If anybody else can get something out of it, great. And I agree with that for the music part of things. Obviously, we want to impact the most people we can, and our time is valuable. So, you know, do the best job you can. But I think to pick the version, get some input from friends, get some input from people that you trust their criticism, that will be critical and give you some feedback. Not harsh necessarily. It's like you don't
Mhm.
want them to, you know, convince you not to release it. If you don't need that kind of friend for this, but you know, you do need some feedback, and some people will honestly tell you what they think, and that's good. And if you can handle the feedback, then you'll make a better product. So that's important. A better piece, better art piece, whatever you want to call it. So that's a big one. What are you trying to accomplish? I can tell you that Mike and I feel, and this is all like live now, so I don't know if he's heard any of this, but I feel like when we've written our best stuff, it was when we didn't care that we were trying to sell it. Like we didn't care. Like of course we want to sell it. You know, he's got Death Trap Studios, for God's sake. We're putting our life on the line every time we step into that thing. But but we don't, if we're not sitting there like, well, what's this teenager thinking about this, and what, you know, if we think that, then we try too hard, and I think it loses its honesty, and I think it loses the best of us. So if it's going to sell, it's because it's supposed to sell, and I think
Ellen, can you just repeat that last part, what you just said, please?
yeah, I think it loses its honesty if we don't do that, and I think if it's supposed to sell, it's going to sell.
Mm.
So I think it's important to be true to yourself. I write music because I love it. I write music because it comes to me, and I feel like it's my job to try to put it out there. And when I don't, well, if I did the same as my teaching, I probably would be very prolific, because there's a lot of songs, there's a lot of muses that are probably very angry at me, but I'm not trying to give up on them. And they haven't quit me yet either. So, you know, one thing about that might help people, or might be frustrating too, is that I try not to throw away anything. If I wrote on a scrap of a napkin some idea I got in a restaurant hanging out with my friends or something,
Mhm.
then I'm gonna stick that in a notebook somewhere, and try to not lose that, because even if I never use that, I might come back 5 years, 10 years later, and be like, hey, that line. And a great point, since he's on this call, I'm assuming, or we'll hear this later, is that Mike Rowe did this. There's a piece that he wrote that I think is the best piece either of us has written yet, just as far as beautiful and melodic and all that. And he wrote this tune, I don't know when, but he was singing it, he was playing it on guitar, a simple melody, and it was da 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 dee da. It's copyrighted, right, Mike? But anyway, I won't get into it too much. But it was like that. And then he asked me, as I guess he felt like I maybe sometimes the lyrics come quicker. He wrote the lyrics for this one, and they were gorgeous. But so he asked me to write some lyrics, and I did, and I wrote a couple different things, and he didn't love any of them, and I was like, oh, that sucks, because you know that kind of sucks. I was like, all right, this felt really good, but whatever. Puts the song away. I don't hear about it. He brings it back like maybe almost a decade later. Check out this song. I used the melody that from way back, and like he made. I swear, when you guys do hear this song, I think it's gonna be the one. Like if there's a one, like that
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's a beautiful song. In fact, he sang it for my wedding with my wife Leanne.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and we had a very small crowd. We had to get people in the hospital. It was the whole thing, but he was the only musician allowed, and because you know, if you were there, I would have snuck you in too.
Can you
But
share
he
the
wrote,
title of that song, or
yeah, it's oh boy. I lost it in the versions. Let me think about it for a minute.
I like this. You're being mysterious. This is good. It'll build the anticipation.
Right? Oh man. It. I know it. It will come to me in a minute. So maybe we'll chat and I'll come back around to it. But yeah, it's a beautiful tune. Well, hmm, I'd love to play it for you, but I can't. That's one step too far.
So
But
is incremental progress, are you planning a full album or an EP or what's on the
well,
horizon?
I should ask you these questions because you're the more experienced songwriter as far as doing it for time and making a living at it somewhat. And I think the idea was to get it out, and I don't think we're gonna have a whole album's worth of stuff unless we wait until it becomes irrelevant again.
Mhm.
No, I hate to say that, and maybe it's sooner than that, but we don't have a whole album's worth of stuff to go. If we did our original idea where we each released like 3 or 4 tunes, maybe, but I don't. So I'm thinking a single probably for this one,
I love
and
it.
it doesn't really fit the rest of our themes of our other songs.
Mhm.
Um, which are mostly the usual, love stories and things gone south and situations. Um, so I do feel
I wanna hear all of it. I wanna hear all of it.
like all of art of Brother Martin. That's the one I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, well, no, everything that Incremental Progress
Oh,
puts
oh,
out,
okay. Okay.
I wanna follow it on Spotify. I wanna listen to it. I wanna hear all
All
of it.
right, all right. As soon as it's ready, you will be the first. But yeah, and maybe even before it's ready. Some of it, obviously. I love your opinion on all that. But so anyway, I think that's gonna be the deal. I liked your idea. I think we're gonna re-release it. I'm gonna work out the choir parts. We talked about doing some gospel choir parts, the original ones, but maybe strengthening them a little bit, using them some
Uh-huh.
more throughout, and then do a nice version where we get it mastered, and then release it, etc. On all the usual suspects. So that for sure. And we've been talking about it. And also, I would like to, and this is a cool thing because I did play it for my boss at school, who's the fine arts director, who played it for the president and a few other people at my school, diversity committees, chairs, things like that. That he would be open to us having it performed on a chorus concert here, having the
Oh,
kids sing it.
wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
And he said that he would, if the kids are involved with it, he would be okay to like pay for a studio time for us to do it with them. So that might not be our, like, that's obviously our song, but it might not be our version, but we could, maybe piggyback on that. And Mike and I created this with the idea that we would maybe try to get school choirs to have a
Mhm.
version of it out
Sure,
here.
sure.
So
Well, with
that's
your permission, I'd love to post a link to the YouTube, video on this,
please,
podcast.
please, you have all the permissions you want. Thank you so much. Yeah. As far as checking that out, that'd be great. And thank you again for helping us get it out there because it would take too long. It would still be sitting on. I just know we would. So I'm very thankful to you for that.
Well, I think it's a perfect example of you're living it, and putting it out and putting yourself out there. And I know there's going to be somebody who's going to listen to this, and they're going to have a very similar situation.
Mm.
And I know that that's going to have a direct impact on that song getting out there. Alan, it's been absolutely amazing to have you on the pod. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing these stories. I'd love to have you back at a later time, maybe after some more songs come out.
I like it what you did there. But yes, I definitely would do that. Yeah.
And that would be fantastic. And I just want everybody to know that if you can hear my voice, it's never too late and it's too late to quit. You
Oh,
got this. Thank you so much, Alan.
thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the inspiration.